Gentlemen, are you facing a custody action during a family court hearing over divorce? If so, stay tuned. That's exactly what we'll be talking about today. We're focusing on a case of a father who came to us. His name is George. His divorce took place a number of years back. And of course, when he applied for custody, as many of you anyone who's been involved with the family courts know, the chances are that almost for sure the child, in this case it's a son, would go to the mother and George would get visitation. Very irritating to George, but feeling what else could he do? So that continued on, that arrangement of him having access to his son continued on for a couple of years, and then one day, boom, all of a sudden, the ex-spouse notifies him she is moving, taking George's son away. 5 hours driving, making it impossible for George to have any access with his son. After a number of months and finding this just desperately impossible, George, to his commendation and showing what a fantastic parent he is, he packed up his home, his work, and moved that 5 hour distance in order to reestablish that relationship with his son, which he had enjoyed from the time the child was born. And so he started developing that relationship back, reestablishing his relationship with his son, and that went on for another couple of years, and then boom, all of a sudden he gets noticed now she is relocating again, taking the son 2,000 miles away. Clearly, under those circumstances, there is no way that son will ever get to see his or have a relationship with his dad. And the dad, in effect, will have just lost his son. So George did, and let me backtrack just a little bit. When he lost his son the first time, the 5 hours away, he made application to the courts and tried his best. But most of you who have been involved in the courts, you know what the money is demanded by your lawyer, and the money just kept on being demanded, and more money until not very long, George's bank account, like so many of you, was zero. So he was forced into a situation where he had to sign a settlement, and that she would be allowed to stay the 5 hours away, and George could have access. When you've spent all your savings on lawyers trying to fight for your children, you get really backed into a corner. So in any event, after this second time George's son was moved away, George again, by this time, had tried to save up more of his money because there have been a number of years in between the first and second time his son was removed from him. And so he's right now in the middle of trying to reverse custody. And for any of you who understand our family court system, you know that a father obtaining custody or seeking custody, that is a battle like this. For a father who's trying to reverse custody, that is a battle like this. But despite that, George is determined to not abandon his son. Good for George. We commend him highly. We support him 100%. And we'll be continuing to follow his case. In today's video, we're following up on the previous video we did about George's case, in which we talked about the friendly parent rule. In this video, we're going to be talking about perhaps it's one of the more powerful aspects of family law. It's a principle that's usually, in many countries, it's actually ingrained in the family law statute, and it's referred to as the best interest of the child. It's so important that judges are expected, they're supposed to make their final ruling based on that very important and significant concept, the best interest of the child. But is it done that way? Well, We don't know for sure because it doesn't seem to always be that way, but certainly George is putting in his best effort. And in this video, we want to give you some assistance in trying to define what constitutes the best interest of the child. So we're going to give you some examples from George's case so that you can get a handle yourself on, first of all, preparing your own case if you're facing a custody situation. And you can learn a little bit from what George is learning, because this is a learning experience for George too. So we're going to give you an example of George's son. This child, when living in the initial home in the initial city, he had a friend right next door. And he and his friend would go riding on their bicycle together and playing with all sorts of ways. But riding on their bicycle, that was one of their big occupations. And of course, George's son, this child has just had that relationship ripped away from him. Right across the street from the child's home, there was a young girl who would go to the park with this child and George's son, and to play on the swings. And we need not tell you that now with these two removal of this child from the initial family area, George's son has not seen that girl for a disturbing length of time. And we'll move on to another example here, because I think these examples are letting you see that when a custodial parent has the unfettered or unlimited right to move the child, and that's in legal terms, that's called mobility, it certainly is damaging to the child and cannot be viewed as in the best interest of the child as defined in law. So let's move on to this child's school. And at his school, he had two great friends that he would have lunch with. All three of them would be having lunch together, and then during recess they would be playing soccer together, and sometimes even after school was over, they might play sports out in the playground before heading home. Needless to say, this child has had cut off his relationship and his friendship with those two boys at school. And of course, as a lot of children do, they have a favorite teacher at school, as does George's son. And this child had a favorite teacher who, of course, he has not seen for these several years since the ex-spouse relocated to, first of all, 5 hours away, and then now 2,000 miles away. And beyond that, there's the school itself. This child became familiar with the school, happy with the school, but all of a sudden, he was ripped away from the school and the principal and the caretaking staff there. All the people he got to know in that school, all gone in a flash. I want to move on to a few other relationships that every parent can understand with their children, and that is with the family doctor. Not only do children are they uneasy in the initial stages of going to visit a doctor, there's a lot of adults that are uneasy with doctor visits. But of course, after a period of time, after this child had been seeing the doctor on a regular basis, he became more familiar and more comfortable. So the doctor's visits were not as terrible as they were in the initial stages. But again, now that relationship is totally destroyed, and he's had to reestablish a relationship with a new doctor at the 5 hour distant mark. And then now he'll have to go through the same thing again at these 2,000 miles unless George is successful in reversing custody. And let me move on just to one last example that everyone can relate to, adults and children alike. The going to see the dentist. Who wants to go to see the dentist? And certainly some kids are very terrified when they have to go to make their first appointments with the dentist. But of course, as the dental appointments continue with proper dental care, then of course this child got familiar with and friendly with the dentist, so it was not a big problem. But then he had to start all over again with a new dentist 5 hours away, and then now with this 2,000-mile move, he has to start with a third dentist. Can anyone believe that that is in the best interest of the child? I don't think so. I think it's very, very clear. And in reality, that, well, of course, George and we are hoping that the judge will see that also. But just to make this more poignant and make it perhaps more powerful when the judge hears this information, what I'd like you to do is pause this video right now, grab yourself a pen and paper, and rewind back to the 5-minute mark. Because I'm going to recap from the 5-minute mark on these examples that I've used right now. More specifically, I'm going back to the boy who lived next door to this child before he was ripped away. I ask you, first of all, when you're reviewing these facts, be sure that before you turn the video on at the 5-minute mark, you have a pen and a paper and write down those examples, because you need to take those examples and, of course, apply them to your own case. But take them to your lawyer and insist that your lawyer present them to the judge, because any right-minded thinking person can understand that none of these examples are in any way in the best interest of the child. But I want you to focus, when you're writing down your paper, I want you to focus on not just the boy who lived next door and would go riding on his bicycle with this child, but rather, I want you to write in your paper, the boy next door is not just a boy next door. His name is Billy. When you add the name of the child on your paper and for your lawyer to present to the judge, we're not only looking at the legal issue of the best interest of the child, we're looking at a very human issue here, and the judges are human. And likewise, the girl across the street who would go to the playground and play on the swings with this child. Her name is Betty Ann. So please write that on your paper. It's not just a girl across the street. This is Betty Ann, who this child has lost. Let's move on to the school situation. The two boys that this child would have lunch with and play soccer with and play sports with, they're not just two boys. Their names are Joe and Butch. This is personal. And these are two great friends that this child has had ripped away from him by the move, the relocation, the two relocations now of the ex-spouse. No one who's thinking rightly can suggest that this is in the best interest of a child. And then at that same school, we talked about this child's favorite teacher. This child's favorite teacher is not just a teacher. Please write on your paper, this child's teacher is Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown got along very, very well with this child, and the child loved going to his classes, but he's lost all that now. This child got used to the school, was comfortable with the principal and the caretakers and all the staff in the school. He's lost all that. Let's move on to the doctor. It took this child a little while to get used to the doctor visits, as is common with a lot of children. But I want to make it very clear that this is not just a doctor. This doctor is Dr. James, a friend of this child. And this child has now lost complete contact with Dr. James. So let's just move on to the last component, and that is this child's dentist, who he established a good relationship with. He became comfortable going to see the dentist, which takes a lot. He's not just a dentist. This dentist's name is Dr. Black. This is a very personal part of this child's life. And I suggest to you that this child's life, because the ex-spouse wanted to relocate for her convenience, this child's whole life and relationships and friends has been turned completely upside down. Is that in the best interest of a child? Really? In our organization, we are very optimistic, or maybe I won't use the word optimistic, hopeful, supportive of George, supportive of his son, encouraging him. And that's one of the reasons we're making this video, to give George a little bit more detailed information that the average person who's never been through family court, they don't understand how important that terminology, best interest of the child. And in George's case, it has to be beyond comprehension how any judge or any parent could ever think of what I've just described to you about this child is in the best interest of the child. So we want to move on to a few more very important parts of this video for those of you who are watching. First of all, none of what we tell you is legal advice. We do not give legal advice. We give you information from the other 30,000 fathers who have come through our group. We've been operating for a little over 30 years. We've had 30,000 fathers' cases, so we've learned a lot through that. And you can learn hopefully from that too. And that's what the previous scenario that was outlined here was based on, how many times when that can be presented to a judge. The judges are not just interpreting the law, they are human beings who can understand all these friends that this child is losing. That's not to be just dismissed. But we do not give legal advice. Whatever you learn in our videos, in our literature, we have video meetings for you to attend. You must take whatever you think might help your case. Be sure to take it to your lawyer for proper legal advice. So a few more items that we're going to leave with you. And of course, one is that while I can continue talking here, be sure that you copy down the link up above. You'll have to copy and paste. It's not a clickable link, but copy and paste it. Because by going to that link, you can become involved with our organization, Kids Need Their Dads. We want to hear about your situation. We want to provide assistance. We send out literature. We have video meetings for you to be able to communicate with other fathers in the same situation that you're in, so you can learn from other fellows' cases. So do copy and paste, or write down that link above so that you can gain more benefit from us about your situation. Second item we want to bring to your attention is down below in the comments. We want you to be sure, after this video is over, toward the end, go to the comments, describe for us in as much detail as you can why you're watching this video. What's the nature of your situation? What is your interest? What is your number one problem, your number one concern? The reason we ask you for that is because our future ongoing videos are always based on what you write in the comments down below. We make these videos so they can have the maximum benefit for the maximum number of fathers, and that can be done when you describe your case or your question or your number one, especially your number one concern or problem, in the comments down below. And then item number 3, just so that you can be notified as new videos are made and come up, and also so that you can follow along in George's case, because of course, no matter what the outcome of George's court court case is going to be, whenever the hearing date is going to take place. We will certainly, and we want to notify you fellas. Did he win or did he lose? And what can we learn from George's case? However, you will not know when those videos are coming up if you don't click the subscribe button down below and right beside it the notification bell. If you click the subscribe button and the notification bell, then when the next reports come up on George's case and on videos on other family law matters and actually legal issues beyond family law, you'll be notified if you have clicked the subscribe and the notification bell right beside it. So in any event, we encourage you to take some action right now to do the best that you can, get involved with us so that together you and we can provide the maximum assistance possible for your children. Because we very often say that if you and we don't work together to help your children, they cannot do it for themselves. So let's get started right now. Thank you so much for watching.